Hi, everyone. Max Emmer from Emmer Law. I'm here with Nicole Gopoian Wirick, who is a financial guru with a legal background in Birmingham. And in addition to having her own boutique brokerage and providing investment services, Nicole and I are both a bit of a, pop culture, like to keep up. And so, Nicole, I'm actually going to give it to you. We were talking about something offline that kind of covers both of our areas of interest and professional background. And I think people might find it a little more interesting than just the diatribes on, professional competency and information.
Yes, Max, just to bring your viewers up to speed, a couple of weekends ago, I attended a touring Broadway play here in Detroit called Six. And it is a musical about the six wives of Henry VIII. And the play opens where all six women are standing up and they list off their experience. So it's divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
So I can make money on 2 out of 6. Okay. So
well, that's right. So those are the two we're going to talk about here, but I'm just laying the stage for our viewers. And it was a phenomenal show where these women start off by competing for who had the worst experience with the king, Henry VIII, and it's like a competition, which I know we both love since we're both
yes.
But as I was leaving this show, I'm like speed dialing Max because I'm like, Max, this translates into modern day, and how can we use these sort of two, we'll dial into the two women who were divorced and had very different experiences in their divorce, and how does that dial into modern day today, and how you and I can help our clients. So let me take 30 seconds, Max, and bring you up to speed on the two divorce scenarios.
Would that
be all right? Okay.
Please.
So the first scenario is Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, who was a daughter of the King and Queen of Spain that Henry married in order to further diplomatic relations with the country of Spain. And Henry lost interest in Catherine because she couldn't produce a male heir. She had one daughter, Mary. And Henry lost interest in Catherine and was ready to move on to his next wife, the second wife, Anne Boleyn. And Catherine was banished to what we understand as less than desirable living circumstances, and she was unable to see her daughter, her child, Mary, because of that separation. So I want to talk to you about that, Max. Before we do, I'll tell you about Henry's, fourth wife, Anne of Cleves, who had a totally different experience. And that experience was that Henry, after Jane Seymour died, his third wife died, he needed to remarry. So he entailed the help of a famous artist who painted portraits. And this artist produced portraits of two women. He picked Anne because he thought she was the most beautiful to be his next wife. Sight unseen in real life. He only saw her portrait.
That's always a risk.
It's like a modern day dating app, if you really think about it.
Or the perfunctory mail order bride, if that's a thing.
Certainly. So in any event, when Anne arrived, Henry thought that she was not nearly as beautiful in person as she was in her portrait, but she was really smart, and she was able to sort of manipulate her. And while they were divorced, she maintained a wonderful relationship with him. And as such, he put her up in a beautiful palace, and she had a lovely allowance that she received every month. And she was living her best life without Henry, because she was able to sort of negotiate this wonderful outcome.
Sounds like a collaborative divorce.
Yeah. Can you help me understand, Max, how modern day, Catherine's situation versus Anne's situation might play out? How do you deal with the modern day Henry?
Well, dealing with the modern day Henry is tough, and I haven't represented a king. I've represented some clients who might think they are a king or queen. I think the cases are so stark because, one, and I'm a royal junkie. So when we talk about male heir primogeniture, when it was only the male heir got to rise to the throne, and that since has changed. Obviously in this day and age, one, that would be such a peculiar situation and not directly, relatable. But I think when we talk about standard of living, and expectations beyond divorce. If we're talking about a king back then, we talk about a very affluent, successful, high society person now. And no, you don't simply get to just dump someone out on their keister to live a life of squalor, especially if that's not what they were accustomed to. We see it all the times in movies and TV shows. And while it is a bit exaggerated, there is something to the extent of the life you were accustomed to and expected to living. Now, granted, in the state of Michigan, I always say alimony and spousal support. Everyone always wants to know. If you're married for 4 years and the person's really rich, it's a short-term marriage. There's not likely going to be some huge award there. But if you have a long-term marriage where one party was the earner, the asset holder, the provider, and the other party, say, stayed at home or helped children or the home or whatever it is, that person does not get to dump because maybe they don't like their look anymore, or maybe they think they've aged out of them. And one thing I'm going to say about the sight unseen being unhappy with the acquisition, there's a new trend in prenuptial agreements, which Henry probably would have benefited from. And they are called wait clauses. And what people try to do is, like they try to control everything else about their spouse or future spouse's life, in these agreements, it's very romantic and very warm-hearted. Oftentimes men, but I suppose either spouse, will put in something how if a party does not maintain certain physical requirements or physical attributes, that can be looked at and kind of looked down upon in the event there's a dissolution of a marriage and accounted for there. These, I have not litigated one of these. These are not really enforceable. Oftentimes when we're talking about these sorts of issues, we go to a public policy argument. And I don't see a court in the land believing it's good public policy to allow people to contract whether if they gain or lose 10 pounds, their financial future and their familiar future should be thrust into jeopardy. But interestingly, in the second situation, when everything's hunky-dory, that we can do. And that's what I specialize in. And I always say, look, the best divorce is still a divorce. Now, there are the people who are best friends and they love their kids and each other. They just grew apart. And that's great. That's not always true. But you don't have to be best friends. If you have children, you have to be able to coexist and you have to be able to co-parent. And I tell a lot of clients, especially when we're talking financials and we're talking resources and the marital estate, for people who have resources, I'm not saying that you should do something that you can't afford to make your ex-spouse, comfortable or happy, etc. They're never going to be as comfortable or happy as they want. But I can assure you, one, if you want to fight them on it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to spend more money fighting than if you just gave it to them. And second, there's a concept that I always use, and it's called the price of peace. And it doesn't mean I think clients should always cave or give in or concede. But I think on many, many issues, I think the price of peace, especially when you're being co-parents, is worth its weight in gold. Because like a marriage, if your spouse is happy, your life tends to be easier. Just because you're not married, man, if they are not happy with you, they can still make your life a living hell. And I think it's really important to have a lawyer and to have an advisor who will help people look more big picture with a 30,000-foot view and say, okay, I know you're pissed today, and I know writing this check is going to drive you nuts. But is that going to make your family unit and your life easier and better for the next decade? And if so, let's think about just biting the bullet. And so I think the parallels are spouses, particular men, can still be disgusting and off-putting when it comes to these sorts of relationships and divorces. But I think for the better, people aren't judged on if they can only provide one gendered heir anymore, fortunately. And two, I think unlike in Henry's era, we have lawyers and processes and strategies to help people come up with the framework for their divorce and their separation to make somewhat of a stable and positively healthy family unit remain.
It sounds to me, Max, like Anne of Cleve had sort of gone through a collaborative divorce before it even came into being.
before it was on Vogue. I mean, she got a castle, she got a stipend, and I'm not going to get that for my clients. You know, I think people might be listening and say, "Oh, that's the deal of the century." But I do think the spirit of that in sort of a collegiality and really just a mutual respect can go a long way. And neither of us are ever going to advocate for someone to do something that is unfair, inequitable, against the law, or that's going to significantly hamper their future. But if there are things we can do to make it easier and more palatable on one side, to make it easier for the other, I think more often than not, it's worth it in spades.
Absolutely.
So
And
Nicole, I think I think if there's any other movies, you know, the next time we get a new Marriage Story or War of the Roses, I think people are always so interested in these topics, and especially with the TMZs and Twitter and Instagram. I think the celebrity and famous divorce from the Kim Kardashian and Kanye, all the way back to Prince Charles and Diana and everything in between, you know, people are fascinated. And I do think it's informative and also entertaining to provide a little professional insights from where we sit, but what we both know and have experience in.
absolutely, Max. Thank you so much. I thought of you throughout that entire program, and I'm sure everyone appreciates you shedding a little light on the situation.
Absolutely. And I'm only on wife one, but if I have to plan for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, I would surely reach out to you. And thanks so much for chit chatting.
Thanks, Max.